A potentially paralyzing illness in children spreads across the country, and the U.S. experiences the worst flu season in decades. CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook has a look at the year in health.
The CDC estimates 80,000 people died of the flu and its complications last season. That's the deadliest toll in 40 years. The virus also killed a record number of children.
180 families put a child in a grave last year because of a vaccine-preventable infection.
Fewer than 4 out of 10 adults got their flu shots last year. The CDC confirmed more than 150 cases of acute flaccid myelitis, or AFM. The rare, potentially paralyzing illness affects mostly children, and it's still unclear exactly what causes it. Just before Thanksgiving, the CDC issued a warning to throw away all romaine lettuce. The alert followed an E. coli outbreak that made dozens of people sick.
This is a very serious kind of E. coli.
Weeks later, officials announced they had narrowed down the source of the outbreak to 3 counties in California. Health officials said the outbreak is not related to one in April, which killed 5 people. A national salmonella outbreak linked to raw turkey products sickened more than 160 people. There were also salmonella outbreaks connected to pre-cut melons, Kellogg's Honey Smacks, and ground beef. In an effort to fight teen smoking, the FDA announced it will seek a nationwide ban on menthol cigarettes.
Menthol is one of the primary vehicles by which kids are initiating on tobacco.
The FDA also plans to restrict the sale of flavored e-cigarettes popular with kids. For the first time, an FDA-approved marijuana-based medicine became available for prescription in all 50 states. Epidiolex is used to treat seizures. A nationwide shortage of EpiPens sent families with allergies scrambling to find the life-saving medication.
I tried to get our beginning of the school year EpiPens and was told that there was a wait.
Life expectancy continued to decline in the U.S. for the 3rd straight year, fueled by drug overdoses and suicides. An increase in colorectal cancer in younger adults prompted the American Cancer Society to release new guidelines recommending adults begin screening at 45 rather than 50. And new federal guidelines call for children ages 3 to 5 to have 3 hours of light to moderate exercise each day.
Children who have unhealthy body weights, even at 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, are much more likely to maintain that unhealthy body weight and become obese later in life.
The guidelines also recommend adults do muscle strengthening activity at least twice a week. Those are some of the year's top health stories. Dr. John LaPook, CBS News.